You know how every family has that one story, like, the one nobody wants to talk about? The story that's passed around in half whispers at awkward reunions or only comes up when someone's drunk at Thanksgiving? Yeah. This is that story for me. Growing up, I always knew my dad had been married before he met my mom. Twice, actually. I didn't think much of it. People split up all the time, right? I figured maybe it just didn't work out, irreconcilable differences or whatever. He traveled a lot back then for work. Sales or construction, something with contracts and schedules. He was gone for days at a time. That's what I was told, and honestly, I never asked more. Until I did. And man, I wish I hadn't. Because the truth? It sounded like something out of a true crime documentary mixed with a twisted love story. Except I was part of the ending. I remember I was 19, just starting college, when I found out. My dad and I were watching some late-night documentary about prison reform. He picked it, ironically, and out of nowhere, he goes, "You know, your mother met me in prison." I laughed. Thought he was joking. He wasn't. So there I was, sitting on the couch with a slice of cold pizza in one hand, remote in the other, and my dad drops that little bomb on me like it's casual Sunday conversation. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. He just sipped his beer and kept his eyes on the screen. "You're serious?" I asked. He nodded, like it was no big deal. "Yep. Your mom was the prison minister." Now, I know my mom. She's the type who folds her laundry while it's still warm. The type who sends handwritten thank you notes and bakes muffins for the neighbors just because. So, obviously, I had questions. "What were you doing in prison?" I asked, already bracing myself for something bad. "Drugs? Robbery? Tax evasion?" But he didn't answer right away. He just sighed this long, deep, soul-heavy kind of sigh and said, "That's a longer story." And I swear to God, I felt something shift in the room. Like the temperature dropped, or maybe just my stomach. I had no idea what was coming. No clue that the next words out of his mouth would flip my entire understanding of him, of me, inside out. So he leans forward, elbows on his knees, eyes on the floor like he's watching ghosts walk across it. He starts with, "It was my second marriage. Her name was Linda." That's the first time I ever heard her name. "She was beautiful," he said. "One of those women who could walk into a room and you'd forget what you were talking about. But she had a wild streak. I think that's what got me. That chaos." He paused there, and I could tell it wasn't easy for him to say all this. I was working on the road a lot back then. Long trips. Weeks at a time. I'd come home and she'd be distant. Cold. But I chalked it up to stress, loneliness, maybe a rough patch. You always want to believe the best about the person you married. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I walked in on her in bed with another man." Just like that. No build-up. Just the sentence dropped like a cinder block between us. She didn't hear me at first. Neither of them did. I froze in the doorway. It's like I left my own body. Everything slowed down. My ears were ringing, like I was underwater. He looked up at me for the first time since he started talking, and his eyes were glossy, glassy. "You know what that kind of betrayal does to you, son? It kills something. Permanently." I didn't scream. I didn't yell. I just backed out of the room, he said. Walked straight down the hall like a ghost. Then he paused. I don't know what I thought I was doing. Maybe I didn't think at all. Maybe I just reacted. But I opened the hallway closet. Reached behind the coats. That's when I realized where this was going. He looked right at me. I kept a .38 in the back of that closet. Unloaded, usually. Except this time, I had taken it to the range a week earlier and never got around to emptying it. My whole body stiffened. My dad had always been calm. Logical. The type who taught me how to sharpen a knife safely and double knot my shoes. But this version of him? This was a stranger. I went back into the bedroom. I didn't even say a word. The guy saw me first. His eyes went wide, like he knew he'd screwed up beyond fixing. His voice cracked just a little. I fired. I hit him in the shoulder. He went down screaming. Linda screamed too. I think she tried to run. I shot again. Hit her in the leg. Silence. I didn't kill anyone, he added quietly. But I could have. And I knew it. Then he looked at me like he was waiting for something, judgment, maybe. Fear. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was still trying to process the fact that my dad, had once walked into a room and opened fire on 2 people. The neighbors called the cops, he said, like he was remembering it in real time. I didn't run. Didn't try to hide the gun. I just sat down on the edge of the bed. He rubbed his hands together like he was cold. Linda was crying. The guy was whimpering, bleeding all over the carpet. But I just sat there. He shook his head slowly. When the sirens came, I actually felt relieved. Isn't that crazy? Relief. Like someone had finally shown up to take the weight off my shoulders. The cops kicked the door in. Guns drawn. He said he put his hands up right away. They cuffed him, read him his rights, walked him out past the guy still moaning on the floor and Linda screaming for an ambulance. They didn't rough me up. I think they could tell I wasn't a threat anymore. I was empty. I asked him if he ever regretted it. He thought about it. I regret losing control. I regret not walking away. But in that moment, it didn't feel like I had a choice. It felt like the betrayal swallowed everything else. Logic, reason gone. And you know what? Hearing that scared the hell out of me. Because I always thought people snapped in movies or books. Not real life. Not my dad. But he wasn't done. Not even close. Because the next thing he told me changed everything again. They gave me 10 years, he said. Strict regime. Maximum security. But the judge called it a crime of passion, so I guess that saved me from life. He served 4 years. 4 years behind bars for shooting 2 people. Good behavior, he added. I kept my head down. Did my job in the kitchen. Kept to myself. And that's when the story started to twist. 2nd year in, the prison brought in a minister. Young, soft-spoken, kind eyes. She didn't look like she belonged there. But she kept showing up every Sunday anyway. I blinked. Wait, Mom? He nodded. Your mother. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane. My dad met my mom while he was an inmate in a maximum security prison, and she was the one reading Bible verses and trying to bring hope to the hopeless. He smiled when he talked about her. She saw something in me I didn't even see in myself. She asked questions. Real ones. Not just, have you accepted Christ? More like, what made you stop caring about yourself? And I could tell, in that moment, that he had loved her from the very first honest question. She wasn't supposed to fall for me, he said. And I sure as hell wasn't supposed to fall for her. But rules? They were already long past those. So how does that even happen? I asked him. How do you fall in love with someone who's technically there to save your soul? He gave me a little smile. Not proud, not smug, more like someone remembering the first time they saw the sun after years of rain. It didn't happen all at once, he said. She started bringing me books. Not religious stuff, just books. Stories. Poetry. The kind of things that make you feel human again. He said they'd talk after the Sunday service. Sometimes about faith. Sometimes about guilt. Sometimes about nothing. And those were the best ones, when they just existed together, without the weight of the past crushing down on every word. Eventually, we couldn't ignore it anymore. The way we looked at each other. The way she'd linger a little too long before leaving. I was stunned. I mean, my mom? The woman who made me say grace even over microwave pizza? Wasn't that, like, against the rules? I asked. Absolutely, he said. She could have lost everything. Her license, her reputation, her standing in the church. He looked down at his hands. But love doesn't always play by the rules. Especially not in places built to crush it. Then he paused. And then came the day she filed the paperwork for something neither of us ever imagined would actually get approved. I raised an eyebrow. What paperwork? He grinned. A conjugal visit. I just stared at him. You're telling me I'm the product of a prison hookup? He laughed. Like, actually laughed. Don't call it a hookup, son. That makes it sound cheap. But that's what it was, technically. My mom, the prison minister, filed the forms, pulled some strings, and someone, somewhere, approved it. Probably thought it was just a formality. That no one would actually follow through. They followed through. She booked the trailer. You know the one, they call it family housing to keep it respectable. Little metal box outside the main complex. Plastic chairs, thin mattress, one roll of toilet paper. Not exactly romantic. And then, without flinching, he said it. That's where you were made. I didn't know what to say to that. Like, what do you say to that? My existence started in a trailer behind a prison. With a man serving a sentence for shooting his wife's lover and a woman who risked her entire life's work to love someone locked in a cage. I got out the next year, he said. Early release for good behavior. Plus the judge must have figured I wasn't going to go shoot anyone else. And Mom? I asked. He nodded. She waited for me. Left the ministry. Said loving one broken man was better than preaching to 100 who weren't even listening. You'd think getting out of prison would feel like freedom, he said. But the second those gates opened, I realized I had no idea what I was doing. He had no job, no car, no credit, no apartment. Nothing but a criminal record and a woman waiting outside the gates who probably should have run the other way. But she didn't. She picked me up in this old Civic that rattled like a shopping cart. She had packed a thermos of coffee and a bag of those little powdered donuts I used to talk about. That detail stuck with me, the donuts. It's always the small stuff that makes it real, you know? We stayed in a motel the first few weeks. She used her savings. Slept on crunchy sheets, shared cheap takeout, tried to figure out what kind of life we could build. They didn't talk about the future right away. They were too busy surviving the present. I got a job washing dishes at a diner. Boss didn't ask too many questions. Paid cash. Your mom started working at a library. Shelving books, checking out dog-eared romance novels to lonely old ladies. And then he said this. We didn't tell anyone we were expecting. I blinked. Wait, so no one knew about me? He nodded. Not until you were already here. It felt safer that way. Like if we kept you a secret long enough, maybe the world wouldn't ruin it. And damn if that didn't hit me right in the chest. Because I'd always wondered why there were no baby photos, no showers, no family stories about my birth. Now I knew why. That night after he told me everything, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in my old room, staring at the ceiling like it might spell out some kind of answer. My dad a shooter. My mom a prison minister who fell for him anyway. And me? I was the result of a one-night pass in a prison trailer behind a barbed wire fence. So what does that make me? I asked him the next morning. Straight up. I needed to know. Dad, I said. Am I a mistake? He didn't hesitate. No. You were the first thing I ever did right. And I could feel it when he said it. He wasn't just trying to make me feel better. He meant it. Like in the middle of a life full of chaos and guilt and impossible choices, I was the one thing that made sense. Your mom used to say you were proof that something good could grow out of something broken. But that didn't stop the questions in my own head. Was I carrying his rage? His violence? Was there something inside me waiting to snap like he once did? He must have seen it on my face, because he said this. You're not me, son. You have my blood, but not my burden. That ended with me. And I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the thing is, once you learn your whole origin story is built on betrayal, bullets, and forgiveness, it changes you. Even if just a little. You'd think after hearing all that, I'd just get in line, let it all sink in, and move on. But it wasn't that simple. I couldn't shake the feeling that my entire existence had been a reaction to someone else's brokenness. So I did what I usually do when I don't know what else to do. I threw myself into work. I tried to distance myself from the mess. It was easier that way, right? Focus on grades, career plans, keeping my head down. Pretend the cracks didn't run all the way through me. Maybe if I kept busy enough, I wouldn't feel the weight of my dad's past hanging over me. But it wasn't enough. It never is. I started feeling the pull of his story. Not in a way that made me want to replicate it, but in a way that made me ask, what kind of man do I want to be? Do I carry his rage in me somewhere, like a ticking clock waiting for the right moment? Or do I learn to channel everything he'd failed to? The control. The awareness. The ability to not go off the rails like he did. My friends noticed. They said I was quiet, more withdrawn. And honestly? They were right. I tried therapy for the first time. Not the talk about your childhood kind, but the kind that digs deeper, at least that's what the app promised. It worked better than I expected, to be honest. I found myself asking the same question over and over, what is forgiveness? Forgiving my dad? That was easy. He was a different person now. But forgiving myself? Accepting I wasn't a product of his mistakes? That was harder than I thought. So, for the first time in my life, I decided to take a step forward. I wasn't going to let his history decide mine. I wasn't going to carry it like some kind of legacy I had no say in. I was going to find my own path. I guess you could say I was tired of being a passenger in my own life. For years, I'd let the weight of my dad's choices, my mom's sacrifice, and all the family drama define me. But no more. I decided to take control. I signed up for a mindfulness course, something about learning how to live in the present, and not just exist in it. I also started volunteering at a youth mentorship program. Kids who didn't have the greatest home life, kids who didn't see much hope in their future. The kind of kids who needed someone to show them that they weren't defined by the chaos around them. And man, did it feel different. The kids reminded me of myself, in a way. They were still figuring out who they were, and in a weird way, helping them made me feel like I was helping myself, too. It wasn't just about doing better, though. It was about being better. I had to confront all those internal questions. Was I my dad? Was I doomed to repeat his mistakes? And when I came out the other side, the answer was clear: I was me. Not a copy of him, not a result of his past. Just me. I started to see my parents differently, too. My dad, he wasn't a monster. He made a horrible mistake, sure, but he wasn't a villain. He was a man who had been broken by life, who had made amends in his own way. My mom? She was a woman who saw goodness in someone no one else did, even when it risked everything. I realized that love and redemption weren't neat or tidy things. Sometimes, they didn't come wrapped in pretty bows. They were messy, painful, and confusing. But they were still real. I wasn't about to spend the rest of my life feeling trapped by things that weren't even mine. I wasn't going to let a broken past keep me from building something worth living for. It wasn't until months later, when things started to feel like they were really settling into place, that I realized there were still things left unsaid. So much had been left unspoken between me and my dad. There was a weight there, unresolved tension I couldn't shake off, no matter how hard I tried. I sat down with him one evening, just the two of us. No distractions. No TV. Just that uncomfortable silence that comes with realizing the last conversation you had with someone wasn't nearly as complete as you thought. You know, I started, feeling a little nervous. I've been thinking about all this stuff you told me. He looked up from his coffee. About my past? Yeah. About your past, about me, about everything. And I think I need to ask you something. He set his mug down, leaning forward, like he was bracing himself. What's that? Do you ever feel like you didn't deserve my forgiveness? I asked. I know you regret the shooting, but what about everything that came after? The way you hurt people in ways that weren't just physical? He took a long breath, his face tightening with what I could tell was old guilt. But then he said something that surprised me. You're right. I didn't deserve forgiveness. I still don't think I do, to be honest. My heart hitched. So, what? You've just been waiting for it all to catch up with you? He shook his head, looking out the window. I don't know if forgiveness works that way. It's not about me deserving it. It's about learning to live with what you've done, and trying to be better from that moment forward. I sat there, processing that. It was heavy. But it also felt like a relief. For so long, I had expected him to carry some kind of burden that was never really mine to make him carry. But do you think I'll ever be able to forgive myself? I asked. For being the product of all that mess? He smiled softly, his eyes softening with years of understanding. You're not your past, son. You're not my mistakes. And you're not your mother's choices. You're just you. And that's enough. In that moment, something inside me clicked. I didn't need to have it all figured out. I didn't need to forgive him or myself right away. But I could start by accepting that sometimes, things just happen. And you move forward from them one step at a time. It's weird, you know? How one conversation, just a few simple words, can change everything. The weight of the past didn't disappear overnight, but it didn't own me anymore. I could look at my dad and see him for who he was now, an imperfect man who'd made terrible mistakes but had somehow found a way to move forward. And I could look at myself and realize I didn't have to be tied to his mistakes. I was allowed to create my own future. I started letting go of the anger I didn't even realize I was holding on to. The anger at my mom for staying, at my dad for doing what he did, at myself for carrying all of it around like it was mine to fix. I wasn't responsible for their choices. I was only responsible for my own. I took more time for myself, for the things I enjoyed. I reconnected with old friends, started taking weekend trips to places I had always wanted to visit. I even started writing a bit, mostly about everything I'd been through. It wasn't about making a grand statement. It was just about letting my thoughts spill out without judging them. Things weren't perfect, and I didn't expect them to be. But they were getting better. I felt like I could breathe again. I even visited my mom a few times. We didn't talk about my dad's past much anymore. It was easier, somehow. Like we both had put down our heavy loads and just accepted each other, flaws and all. And as for my dad? We were in a good place. It wasn't always easy, but we were getting there. We didn't have all the answers, but we didn't need them. I guess what I learned through all of this is that sometimes, you can't change the past. You can't undo the mistakes. But you can choose how you move forward. You can choose to break the cycle. To take the good and the bad, and somehow turn it into something worth holding on to. It's wild, looking back on all of it. How something so tragic could turn into something that taught me so much. About myself. About my parents. About life. I never expected to be where I am now, but here I am. And I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned. You can't control everything, but you can control how you respond. You can't undo the pain or erase the mistakes. What happened to me, to my parents, that's part of my story now. But it doesn't define me. And it doesn't have to define you, either. Life's going to throw curveballs. The question isn't whether or not you'll make mistakes, but how you learn from them and how you move forward. If you're dealing with a past that feels like it's been haunting you, take a breath. Let go of the guilt you've been carrying around. It's not yours to fix. It's not your fault. It's hard to accept that, I know. But once you do, you'll realize how much space there is to grow. Forgiveness, whether for someone else or for yourself, doesn't have to come in a rush. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. And I'm not saying everything's magically better now. There are still days when I think about my dad's past, or the things my mom sacrificed. But I don't carry that weight anymore. I've learned to take the good and the bad, make peace with it, and move forward. So if you're reading this, feeling like you're stuck in a cycle or trapped by your family's mistakes or your own, take it from me. It doesn't define you. What matters is what you do with it. You get to choose the person you want to be, no matter where you come from. That's the thing about stories, they don't always end like we expect, but they still move forward. And so can you.